TalkRadio.com. Consciousness in action. And you are taking action into your consciousness by tuning into Contact Talk Radio.
And on TuneIn.com, Bing.fm, and UpSnap Mobile.
Contact Talk Radio.
Welcome to Life Mastery with Todd Allen, the talk radio show that dives into the science of higher consciousness. Join Todd and his guests weekly at 10 a.m. Pacific Time and learn how to live a peaceful life with intentional mastery. Enjoy a survey of inspiring topics such as abundance, intention, health, manifestation, love, and transformation. It's all right here, leading authors, speakers, coaches, entrepreneurs with stories and messages to support your well-being, let alone your most evocative dreams.
Hey, it's another groovy day, and mostly because I get up in the morning and I make it that way. And today is Life Mastery Radio Day. Yay! One of my most favorite days of the week. I just dig bringing you great thoughts and ideas for you to use on your very own life mastery journey. Before we get started, though, I always like to get myself centered and situated and calm down a little bit. So let's just take a minute, close your eyes if you feel comfortable doing so, and let's take in a deep breath. And I always like to let that breath out with a big ah, and just let myself connect to that which gives me power. Mine is the universe, but whatever it is for you that you connect into, and just consciously connect to it and realize there's a flow there. There's a give and take, there's receiving and giving, and just consciously connect to that. Let's do that one more time. Let those dreams, visions, and goals just flow up from your solar plexus through your heart center and right out of that speaker box, and throw them out there. And allow the universe the opportunity to make those come true for you. As always, I have my co-host with me today, Jackie. And Jackie,
hi.
There's Jackie. Jackie is how do you describe yourself?
What am I?
What are you?
I am a master of many trades.
Yeah. But if we were to coin that now, you are an instructor of young humans in finding their voice. I tried.
Well, you know what? I would rather use young humans than kids, because kids are baby goats.
Yeah.
And that's always been a little bit of a pet peeve of mine. So yes, tiny humans or young humans, youths. They're my main focus right now, but I do with them the same that I do with adults, which is I teach them how to find their voice and how to craft a message from their stories and how to deliver that message with power and influence, and how to be great leaders and influential leaders. So.
Right. And you have a studio now. We got a great tour of Jackie's studio last
That's right.
week.
Little impromptu tour. Good thing I cleaned house.
That's true. Although I did notice you didn't vacuum. I did notice that. But it's really cool. I have
this really cheap vacuum actually that I had to get for it's this odd story, but anyway, I do.
Every week we're looking. You're in your office, and every week we see new little tidbits, and you can see a printer back there. She's got a printer now.
I have a printer now.
Yeah. So how's it all going? How many students do you have? And you're teaching what, 3 classes a week?
I am teaching 4 classes a week, and I have 25 students right now. And I'm starting registration for new classes and continuing classes of the students that I have currently. So those will begin in another 4 weeks.
Yeah, and you're doing something online too. How's that going?
Yeah, I'm coaching a couple of students outside of my locale here. I have a student named Hedu in Australia. Wow. And he's doing great. He wrote a speech for me and gave me a speech last week in our class time, and it was fabulous. He talked about butterflies and how he had found this caterpillar thinking it was a butterfly and took it to his class at school, and lo and behold, when it came out of its chrysalis after all that process, it was just a moth.
Wow. Oh.
And and so they were so they took this moth outside, and a few minutes later a big bird came down and ate it.
No. Oh my gosh, what a speech. What a story.
He goes, "Is that funny?" And I said, "Well, it's more of a tragedy, but there was some humor in there."
Right. Right. Wow.
It was fun to hear his story.
So people can go to JackieBaileySpeaks.com, and if you're involved with a little human that is right, if you're involved with a little human that is wanting to explore themselves, or you think that they would benefit from, really diving deep down and figuring out what's important to them, get a hold of Jackie, because she will help guide that young human into a better place. And I really get the feeling that Jackie is creating future leaders. I truly do, because learning these skills and this type of leadership and understanding, and especially understanding others and how important others are, and to listen to others, I think that it just gives a huge boost and a huge ability to get ahead of the game, right? These are things that people really don't discover until they're, what, Jack, what would you say? They're late 20s, early 30s?
50s, 60s.
Right.
I didn't discover it till I was older.
Well,
But-
that's true. Me too.
But you know what? You and I, we didn't grow up with this device in our hand that
Right.
distracts us from actually communicating to live humans, right?
Right.
And these kids, that's all they've ever known.
Right.
And so there is definitely this art of communication that has been lost.
Right.
And helping them to rediscover that is enormous in their potential to be leaders, as you say. And that when they learn how to connect with people rather than to names or images on a device, I mean, that's going to really shape their future more so.
Right. JackieBaileySpeaks.com. You can find out more. You can connect with Jackie, and man, from what I hear, it will make a world of difference in your little human that is a gift to you that you're in charge of for a little while.
That's right. Yeah.
And then they fly away.
Well, it's fun to watch them learn from each other,
Yeah.
because they all come from different cultures and different experiences, and to help them connect together in a classroom setting is really fun.
Totally. I want to remind our listeners, today's show page is at www.lifemasteryradio.net. You can go there, connect with us, connect with Jackie, and sign up for our newsletter. Jackie does a really good job every week putting out a little blog post, who's coming up on the show, who's been on the show, and all things Life Mastery. So it's really cool. Their links are all there. And you can go to lifemasteryradio.net or .com, sign up for that newsletter. That's all we'll use that email address for, is to get you great thoughts and ideas, at least links to them, to where you can discover your life and your life mastery journey. Okay, you ready for the show? I see her sitting there.
Ready.
Big smile on her face, somebody who's near and dear to my heart. But we won't go there just yet. Our guest today is Debbie Handrich, and this is what she has to say. It has been said that we all have a book in us. We just need to sit down and write it. I don't know where she got that idea from, but maybe we'll find out. Anyone who has sat down in front of a blank piece of paper or computer screen and shared endlessly in search of an opening line to their story knows that the writing itself can be the hardest step in their creative process. One woman who has been helping budding writers tell their stories is Deborah Handrich, host of the radio talk show Story U Talk Radio with Coach Debby. Her hour-long weekly show airs Thursdays at 4 p.m. Pacific on Alternative Talk, 1150 AM or on internet radio as well. And then they become podcasts. And she's become quite the rock star from what I hear and all the posts that I see. Debbie is a wellspring of information and inspiration for writers and soul searchers alike. How'd I do, Debbie? Did you like that intro?
Yeah, I think I know. Caroline must have wrote that. Great.
I found it.
Thank you.
I found it somewhere. No, I thought it was really cool.
I
Yeah.
like it too. I'm stealing it.
You're a rock star. Did you know that?
So let's just we'll be back the truck up a little bit and describe for us, your history a little bit, Debbie. How'd you get started? I know you taught just exactly what Jackie was describing, except they were a little bit older humans, right? Humans that think they found their voice and really don't know. They're just there to get a credit. Did I get that right?
Yeah. Well, we could go far back. I always loved stories. I always loved reading stories. I had a little brother I would read stories to. But I had very poor vision. I only have 20% acuity and spent my first couple years of education, ages 3, 4, 5, and 6 in special ed. And my parents were told, don't have high hopes for this girl. She's not going to go to college. She's not going to be in sports. She'll have a hard time making friends. She'll be an outcast.
Nothing like pre-programming, huh?
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, or parental support.
Yeah. So they were protective of me, but they were also, and not to blame them, but they were afraid of me because I probably wasn't what they planned. So there I was in the world, but one thing I could do was read, and I was reading very well at a very young age. So that bumped me out of it, special ed. If you can read, you don't qualify very well for special ed. And I found that not only did I like to read, but I liked to write, and I liked to share stories, and I liked people, and I liked sports, and I liked all the things they said I could never do. So growing up was kind of tricky because I was really a bullied kid for, this albino white hair and this pale skin and these eyes that move back and forth that are trying to make a clear image out of things. And I didn't really have many friends, but I longed for them. And like I said, my folks were loving people that just weren't sure how to help. But I had the wonderful experience of fantastic teachers. Fantastic. And my mother always said, you'll be one of them. That's what you're destined to do. You are a natural born teacher. And maybe that's why I had 2 teachers in my memory that really scared me. And other than that, probably 1,000 that I adored. And they were behind me totally. So somewhere around the age of 23, when I had been out and trying different quick careers, maybe I'll do hair, or maybe I'll do fashion, or maybe I'll do something that you can learn quickly. I don't know. Nothing was really coming together that grabbed my heart the way that storytelling and teaching did. And so I went to see a career counselor and a school counselor, and I just said, look, I have 20% of my eyesight. The doctor said I can't make it here. Could I take one class at a time? And they said, sure. So it took me 11 years, but I got 3 degrees, a master's degree, and a job teaching college writing. And
Wow.
it wasn't what they told me I would do, but it was the path of my soul that I could hear just sort of knocking on my heart going, just give it another day. Just keep trying. Just keep going for it. And so I did. And let me tell you, it wasn't an easy journey. It wasn't easy to get there, and it wasn't easy to find my way with all these colleagues that, you know, could read 50 pages an hour, and I can read 13. It was a tricky career, but I knew one thing. As much as I wanted to teach children, I did not want to work with their parents. I knew that with every bit of my being. And so I went into college writing, and I brought in what I loved most, which was mythology and the hero's journey, and the love of writing, and the love of our story, and the sociology of our being, and the psychology of our mind. And I just took all of these things I had studied and tried to help people learn how to write their essays. And one day I decided, you know, I want to help people write their books.
Wow. And how do you do that? What's your system to help someone write a book? Because that seems like a monumental task.
You know, the great thing is that everyone thinks it's a monumental task, and that's why I'm in need.
Exactly.
That's the good thing.
Good answer.
Yeah.
So is it not a monumental task then? Or is it less so because you've got someone to help you?
If you're trying to do things that are monumental by yourself, they're monumental. They just are. If you're trying to climb Mount Everest by yourself, it's monumental. If you've got a heck of a good team, it's doable, you know? So what I really do is I bring together the things that coached me through the hardest parts of my life. So I am a firm believer in the faith and the structure of 12-step principles. So they learn a little of what I learned from that. Mythology taught me that there's a life cycle of what we think of as our ordinary life and what we want to dream about, which is a more extraordinary life. And that if we have the courage to dive into it, we'll come back and offer that for others, hence a book. So I bring in anything that has supported me along the way, principles from my coaches like Alan Cohen from Hay House Radio, Robert Holden, who is the founder of Success Intelligence and Lovability. I bring in the laws of spiritual knowledge that Todd taught me through osmosis and through just talking. And honestly, I bring the support I know from the people that saw me as whole. And one person from the very first moment I met him that saw me as whole is Todd. He understood that, yeah, you're legally blind, but you've got a lot of drive in you. And there's a lot you can do. And I believe in you. And to have that kind of support gives you life. It just gives you life. It feeds you on the deepest level. And you make a commitment that you will feed it. And so in knowing that kind of love and in feeling from my mother, you know, you've got this, I had the courage to go out and find ways to create processes for others to write their books. And let's not leave out, I included the knowledge of all my failures to write my own.
Well, you know, you said some really curious things that I just kind of want to drill down a little bit into, and that is, you know, everybody has a book in them, and everybody has a story, and everybody has a story to share and inspire others to I guess I'll just say it like this, not to do what they did.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? This is what I did, and this is the result I have. I don't claim that I would have never done it that way, but this is what happened. But I think more importantly, you touched on a little bit, is when a person sits down and starts working with their story and their timeline, especially when they begin to take a look at that with the hero's journey described by Joseph Campbell, there's an awakening that occurs inside of a person that then brings them to another level. And I think that's a lot about what your drive is. It isn't so much of documenting the story. It isn't so much of putting the words down. It isn't so much of, I got a book. It's about finding out who you are.
That's right.
Did I get it?
Right. It's so essential to me when someone comes and says, I want to write a book, that they understand the best book you could ever create is going to happen because you're interested in your own story. And if you can stay interested enough in your own story to really see it, work with any of the little gaps in there and honor it, you'll write a beautiful book. But if you're not interested in your own story, guess what? You ain't gonna sell that many books. You just won't, because it's coming from a place of, I'm interested in this story because I want to make money, or I'm interested in this story because I want to promote my business. And it dies out because it just doesn't have the depth. But if you're willing to go into the depth of you and own your own story, you can speak just from any stage with a whole lot of confidence.
Well, what do you say to people who feel like they haven't really had an eventful life? They haven't had a lot of challenges or tragedies. Their life's been pretty good. Do they have a story to write? And how do you help them find what that might be, what they have to offer?
A lot of people think that they're boring, or they're ordinary, or they're not special. And if you think that, you're not ready to get writing. You're ready to get exploring. And that's what my process is about. No one is boring. No one is ordinary. Maybe you've been spared of certain tragedies, and I would hope that for anyone. But all of us have been on high learning curves. And someone that I've started to study was the founder of the Waldorf schools, Rudolf Steiner. And he works in these trajectories of every 8 to 9 years of how we move through our development. So for example, 18 is right in the center of that first shot in our life where we want to be something. And it really doesn't pounce on us again with that certain drive until we're about 35, 36, 37. And then it really doesn't show up again until we're 51 or 2 or 3. And it's this drive that is so innate in people that if they're listening to it, it's when they know there's something very unordinary going on. So I help people get back into that time. I mean, for Todd, when he was 50, he joined 7 Toastmasters groups. He had a drive to offer his voice to the world. It works into the code. At 35, I started teaching at a college. And let me tell you, I was driven as all get out. So there is this incredible innate drive in our biology that is meant to propel us. But often we're in such a hurry to get there, we missed out on what it was that made us unique, special, original, thoughtful, creative. And so my process kind of takes people back, and sometimes it only takes people 1 minute to get them talking, and they've got so much to say. And it's from that place. And then they know they got a book.
Yeah. So now, do you help your clients mostly with nonfiction books, or are they fictional books, or both?
So the first 20 years of my own writing was all fiction, because I just love to create, and it was a safe place to go. I don't have a big following for that because I've published very little fiction. The majority of what I've published is in self-help and self-discovery. So people come to me from those areas. And I also love legacy, because when we go into the family story, we really get to the root of what people want to talk about.
Interesting. So I actually do a little bit of that with my students as I make them.
You know, I have to say this. You guys do. It's almost like your two passions are very close to each other, because the
it's
influence
just a different audience.
Totally.
Yeah. But I was going to say, I do make my students look back at their heritage a little bit. And actually, it starts with a conversation with their parents and asking them some questions to discover a story that they can come share about their parents. And I've read recently that they're discovering more and more that depression is most often caused by just a lack of connection to who we are. And so if we can get back to the meaning of our family, the meaning of who we are and why we're here, then we're less likely to fall into a depressive state. And so that's what I decided I needed to really focus a little bit of my curriculum on with my students, is help them recognize where they came from and what those strengths are that they have because of the heritage that has come before them.
Yeah,
so
that's great insight.
Yeah, when you talk about that with your clients as well, you're right. I mean, sometimes we don't recognize who we are and what we've contributed until we go back and discover where we came from and what that meant to us, and the lessons that we learned that we didn't even remember that we learned.
Oh, that was so powerful for me. Just to highlight on that, that was so powerful, and it was really simple too. It was just creating a timeline.
Yeah.
And then you would plug things into that timeline and remember things, and it wasn't a sit down one time process. It was then that night, as I was falling asleep, it was like, oh yeah, well, this happened in between that and this. And so you add that, and then this could be upwards to a 6 month or 1 year process. But then you document that timeline, and it's like, wow, there's a story there.
Oh yeah, there's always story there. And Jackie, you're serving your students so well because you're helping them stay curious. We can't be depressed while we're curious. We can't be depressed while we are thinking with our creativity and answering questions. So what have you always wanted to be in the world? You know, if a person can engage in that question, they fail to have depression. Depression is only the block between how they're thinking about themselves and what their heart knows about themselves. That's it. And it could be a tiny little brick wall or a huge one, but it all comes down as soon as they're feeling their creativity again, and they're speaking from it, and they're standing in it next, and then they're speaking from that, and they're speaking from the podium. And you're really helping people understand at a young and critical age, and working with their folks, that they are worthy in the story they own right now. And that, I think, is a big one, is so many people have thought, my story isn't complete. I'm only 17 years old. I haven't lived much. I lived so much by the time I ever stepped foot into kindergarten. Tons. I had lived so much. But I was aware of story because I'm a storyteller. Right. When we bring people back into that what happened when your little baby sister came home and you were 4 years old? Oh, I wanted to throw her out the window. I mean, those stories start to come up, and
Right.
you have a place to work on.
So I sense that there must be some journaling that you have your clients do. Is that right? Which is a common theme that we keep hearing on our show from many guests in different areas. They all talk about the importance of journaling. So I'm assuming that's also a large part of what you do with your clients. Am I right?
The importance of journaling became a new trend just in the last half a decade here. And a lot of people are talking about it with the idea of knowing your words and just having a dumping ground. So I'm not against that. I'm not against building your vocabulary and having a place to just unload your thoughts. But what I teach around journaling is that your journal is what Robert Holden taught me. It's your daily practice. It's where you get vertically aligned with your voice, because there can be a wall like we talked about. You can call that wall depression. You can call it fear. You can call it anything you want, but journaling breaks that wall down so you're aligned with your real voice. Your real voice comes right out of your heart. If you're not willing to show up for that journal on a daily basis and write a line or a page or for an hour or for whatever you've come to know serves you best, then you're not willing to tell your story. You've got to have that relationship with yourself and your highest voice if you really want to tell a story that serves, Otherwise, you can just go out and write something for the business and get it out there and see how things build and go for it. But if this is really the journal that is going to be the foundation for your life, the foundation of your business, the place from which you speak from, you want to have a relationship with that journal.
Well, and so the journal really helps you compile that timeline too, right? Because you're writing your thoughts and ideas, what's coming up, and it's a great way. Here, let's put it like this. It's a great way to get out of yourself, right?
Yeah.
It's a great way to get out of your way.
Out of your way.
Yeah, it's a great way to get out of the way of the thinking mind and in deeply to the real self. Yeah.
Well, do you feel like that's another area of lost communication is in just simply writing? Because now we're all on keyboards, right? And I find that there's not as much of a therapeutic significance to typing on a keyboard as there is to actually writing longhand. The thoughts of the day, your emotions, something like that. Even though I have horrible penmanship and sometimes I can't read what I wrote later on, I do find that to be far more of a valuable experience than typing something onto.
It is for me too, but I think part of that, Jackie, is because that's our earliest experiences of writing. And so what they tell us is that, and I wish I could quote they, but I'm sorry I can't, but the studies show that when we go back to our earliest experiences of communication, that's what helps us tune in. So the kid that was doing this, that's what's really going to help him get into a journal. The kid that was doing this, whether it's using your thumbs to text, whether it's using your fingers to type, whether it's handwriting, that's going to be the thing that launches them in. And later, if they want, yeah, of course, they can switch it up. But for me, I don't relate as well to my journal when I type it because it wasn't where I started.
Something else you kind of hinted on, and I wanted to drill down a little bit. Maybe you could define it for us, because there's a lot of people that have heard this kicked around and heard this term, and that is the hero's journey. So what exactly did Joseph Campbell describe? I know it's a long, drawn-out process. Maybe you could pare it down a little bit, but this is what helps us understand our story and get our story out to where it's in a presentable format.
Sure. The hero's journey was developed by Joseph Campbell, who is a philosopher of the earlier and mid 1900s and was also George Lucas's greatest mentor. That it's so hard to shorten his story, but to make it accessible, what I want to say is that Joseph Campbell understood as a philosopher, and I'm just going to throw in sociology and psychology, that there are patterns that people follow in their life, and there are archetypes that describe us best. So, for example, one archetype that a lot of men follow is this warrior. They're strong. Todd Allen knows how to be a warrior. You know, he's out there. He has this great strength. He was a Marine, so he understands that.
You're never a was. It is.
Did I say was? I'm sorry. Is a Marine. And so in understanding himself, that archetype goes with him. As we understand our archetypes, we have some choices of where we want to grow. But what Joseph Campbell claimed is you don't have choice on the cycles. You don't have choice. You are a person that just sees yourself as plain. Then you are a person who sees yourself as extraordinary. Then you are a person who is invited to be extraordinary. Then you are someone who fails at extraordinary. Then you are someone who doubts it's extraordinary. Then you're someone who hides from extraordinary. Then you are someone who says, I don't want to die and not be extraordinary. And bam, you're on your journey.
And that's a circle too, right, Debbie? Maybe describe it as it's a circle. How do I do this? There we go.
Yeah.
Wait.
The circle begins with, I'm just here living life, living in the practical world, following politics, buying groceries, doing whatever. And then this thing comes out and says, but I kind of want more, but I don't know how to be more, but I'll try more. Ooh, I failed at more. More is uncomfortable. I ain't going to do more. I hate more. Why do I even think of more? Yuck. And then the mentors come along. Don't you want more? Can't you see yourself having more? I would support you with more. You're going to fail a little more with more, but you could get through more. And then you experience more, and you fail and grow and fail and grow and fail and grow and hope and fail and grow. And then you pop out to this place where you're like, not only do I want more, I am more, I see the more, we're all more, and I have a way of offering more for the world because it didn't matter unless I served. And his whole message, it's called Bringing Home the Elixir. It is, how does all of that come to matter because you made the choice to serve. And you make the choice to serve when it's hard, and you make the choice to serve when you're sad, and you make the choice to serve when it's great, and you make the choice to rest and serve and grow, and then you have a legacy. And that's part of the reason I love helping people write their legacies.
Ooh, we want to talk about that, but just to finish up with the hero's journey, and I think you've coined the heroine's journey, right? We have to be PC these days. Same journey, right?
It's the same journey, but it's the more feminine side of it all, of how you work with the relationships within the journey.
Right. And that's a huge understanding all in itself. We could do a whole show on that, on the feminine and masculine. But what I wanted to point out here is that some of the most successful movies that everybody's familiar with, Star Wars, I mean, you could go down the list.
Harry Potter, The Wizard of Oz, Finding Nemo,
all
All
of
of
them
those. Mhm.
have a form of that hero's journey in it.
They follow it to the T.
Right. It's what sells movies. It's what really sells books, and it really what not only allows an author to complete a book or a story, but it allows a person to really get into it.
Yeah. And it's
Good
why
grief.
you and I are currently hooked on Parenthood, because we're watching about 15 heroes' journeys all at once.
Oh my gosh. It's like, oh my gosh, it's such it, but they're great stories, and it isn't one story, right? It's 100 little heroes' journeys, and it's just, well, I'll just say it like it's addictive. And the series is like 10 years old now. Well, it's probably not that old. It's probably a good 8 years old, but
But
man,
it's
really,
classic.
yeah, it's really good stuff.
classic. Because what I mean, I remember my teacher, Father Rowan at Seattle University, said to he had this, I don't know, metropolitan way of speaking, and I remember he said one day, I want you to all claim why you are here in my classic studies class. And he turns and he says, Debbie Handrich. And I was like, you know, like I didn't get a chance to think. And he says, what are you doing in my class? And I said, I'm here to study the classics because I think it shows all of us how we're really living. And he went, just like that. And he said, my dear, I want you to study Joseph Campbell. And I went, okay, you know, because I had no idea. But to me, that was the truth. We're all living something that classical literature captures over and over and over and over and over again. But it's because the hero's journey is a life cycle. We have no choice but to be on a heroic journey. You know,
Well,
it's like,
and it's not one cycle, right? It's a series of cycles. I mean, they're continually, and there's multiple cycles going on at the same time.
That's right. And every 8 to 9 years, you are introduced to the new one, like it or not. So it's just one of those. It's kind of like, you know, you grow. We're learning in Parenthood right now. One of the boys, his mustache is coming in. Like it or not, that thing's gonna grow. You know what I mean? It's just part of life, and we give so much attention to the physical world. But it's kind of like you have to, at some point, either honor that your soul and your heart is journeying with you, or you just get to hang out in that ordinary start again and again and again of, I'm just doing the day-to-day. Yeah. And that's why people are so unfulfilled. I mean, one of the greatest fulfillments that ever came my way, Todd, was when you asked me, and well, you didn't even ask. In 2012, you put a microphone in front of me and said, hey, everyone, here's my new co-host. And I was just like, wow, you know, but it meant also that I was going to produce and find guests. And all of a sudden I was on a journey of, I love authors, I love reading, but how do you call someone famous and get them on your show? And I started spending 10 hours a week in bookstores, pulling books off the shelf, reading, skimming, following websites. I mean, we weren't as advanced. You know, we were advanced, but not as advanced. I didn't know about publicists. And it just became part of my call to answer of, I want to know these authors. I want to talk to these authors. I want to talk to the ones that will impress Todd, that will support his journey.
That's hard to do.
Yeah, but what I found was the whole bliss thing, because I had always thought following your bliss meant, you know, like chilling out and eating pizza. But it doesn't mean that at all. It means getting to work and doing what you're called for.
Right.
And there were just few times in my life, besides being with college students, that I had ever experienced so much bliss. Was going to East-West bookstores, pulling books off the shelf, sitting in the corner, reading up, getting the websites, calling people, having the nerve to say, I know you don't know me, but I also know you sold 50,000 copies and I want to invite you to be on our show. And them going, how'd you get my phone number? And I'm like, well, yeah. Will you be on our show?
That's my way.
Oh, there are many, many stories. We just have about 10 minutes left, and you said something else that I think is really important to get out to the listeners, and that is about legacy, right? And people that have lived a good life and have all these stories in them, if they just really thought about that in compiling that and publishing it in a book, it doesn't have to be New York Times bestseller, right? But it creates a legacy, and then that person actually lives forever. Is that the thought?
It's true. And the life they're living now just feels so much more meaningful.
And then great granddaughters and grandsons,
Mm-hmm.
then you carry that cycle on, because then they know a part of them, right? And their history, which, you know, I've been hungry for, and I know most people are hungry for, but in today's fast-paced society, we lose sight of where we came from, who our great-great-grandfather was, what they do, where'd they come from, what, you know, all of that. And here we have the ability to create a legacy and document it and leave it for generations.
And generations want to know.
Right,
I mean,
totally.
we want to know. My grandfather died of a heart attack on my mother's 16th birthday. I never got to know him, but he was the sports writer for the Chicago Tribune. And before that, he was the sports writer of the Pittsburgh Press. I would have loved to have had a conversation as a little girl sitting on his lap,
Right.
but I never got to meet him. And so I count on my mother to tell me the stories. And one of the things she often says to me is, I so regret that Grandpa died before you met him and that I only know so many stories.
Well, and maybe the hero's journey that you mentioned we're all on, perhaps because we all are on our own hero's journey, that when someone tells their story, that's why we feel so connected to it, because we are within ourselves part of that story, or that at least that cycle of story, right? And so
Absolutely right.
Sharing your story is not only cathartic to you, but it's going to inspire someone else's story. And you could be the springboard, your story could be the springboard for them on their new journey, or on a different journey, or impacting their journey some way. So it's not only fun to hear stories, but it sounds to me like it's vital for us to hear stories.
To me, I think
it changes who we are.
I do. I believe it's vital. As a writer, one of the things we worry about the most is getting criticized. You know, it's one of our biggest fears. It's why I've got 4.5 finished manuscripts in my desk, and instead of on the bookshelves of you know, the regular stores. And yet at the same time, when we go through hard things, we start to understand why. I mean, I didn't get bullied for no reason. I didn't fail to have my parents show up for no reason. It was so I could understand when I put out a blog and someone comes along and goes, who do you think you are? I can go, another bully, you know? And I've gone through it. I've lived through it. Or someone steals my work and puts it on their website, and I go, another bully. I mean, I know I wrote it. So we come to understand how to work with that thing that just was so unfair back there. But now we have a better relationship with ourselves because we went into our story and we claimed it. And we said, I'm not going to be owned by the bully. I'm still going to show up in the world.
Oh my gosh, ladies, we just have about 5 minutes left. And I know Debbie, you have some programs coming up. People can hear you every Thursday at 4 p.m. Pacific on Alternative Talk Radio, 11:50 a.m. if you're in the Seattle area. So how does a person get a hold of you? And I know you're very open. You'll talk to anybody. What's the best route to get to Coach Debby?
Coach Debby is spelled with a Y. It's Debby. And you can always go to my website, which is just coachdebby.com. And there's contact info there. Contact Talk Radio was the first radio station to support the show that Todd sponsored fully for me, which is Story, capital U. So I did 2 years here with the support of Cameron and Todd. And now it's over on KKNW, where I do a lot of teaching and I interview some authors. But my goal is to offer programs for the first, second, and third time author. And they work in 90-day or 6-month periods of time. And the idea is by the end of that time, your draft is done. And you can do with it what you want. You can send it off to the editor, the publisher, you can self-publish it. But that first draft, you've got it out and you just feel like $1,000,000.
Box checked.
And just to be clear, you're not a ghostwriter and you're not an editor, so to say. I mean, people probably I hired you to be my editor.
Mm-hmm. And your ghostwriter.
But you don't necessarily do that. And it's more about the person developing their own manuscript and ready for that next step.
Yeah, and just like you and I did at times, we had interviews where I got you talking about your story. In your case, it was about adopting your voice so it all came out in your words and in an organization that was easy to read. And yet, with others, what I think is so important is that they say it, hear it, write it, own it, stand in it, and love it. That's your story.
That's
your
cool.
Life.
I don't know that anything. I think we covered it all. Is there one last parting shot that you would have for our listeners that you'd like to say?
Well, I would like to tell people that Todd has a beautiful book, which is a testimony of someone who never thought that he could write a book. And
True.
We worked together to make sure that book was out, 6 Keys to Life Mastery.
And it has a lot of my story in it. And you know what's interesting? I just make this comment. We only have a couple minutes left. But you write something like that, and it's never done. And you always think of other things that you could put in there. So.
Right. Well, that's why you've always got the second book, right, Debbie?
Right, the second edition.
You get the first book out and you think, yeah, okay, good, that was good. Now, wait, there's more things I can add to that, or there's another story I get to tell. Right. And that's why the second book. Now, do you find that the first book is harder than the second book, or is it hard to sit down and write the second book?
Second book is harder because now you have a standard that you want to live up to.
Right.
But the reason you want a coach is the reason I finally hired a coach. It'll never get done if someone doesn't share with you when this body of work really is done.
Right. Because it's never really, you could ponder it forever and ever, right?
Yes, and I pondered one of mine for 20 years.
It's there. It's still there.
You don't want that. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, thanks, Debbie, for showing up. Thank you for being my girlfriend. It's so cool.
Betcha.
What?
You betcha.
Oh, feel the love. Ladies, thank you so much for being on the show today. You can find Jackie at JackieBaileySpeaks.com, and you can find Debbie at CoachDebby.com, and all of their wonderful programs from little humans to big humans can be found there, and you can incorporate them in your lives and get that story started. I think both these ladies are really all about that.
And never forget that the little human lives on inside the big human.
Oh, he's so still there inside.
Oh, yeah. That's what we're always dealing with.
That's right.
I'm still 10. That's about all we have time for today. I hope you enjoyed the show. Tell your friends. Go to lifemasteryradio.net. It's a great show. We have fun. There's great thoughts and ideas for you to use on your very own life mastery journey. Lastly, please make it a great day, because it's all about choice. And you can choose to get that book out of you. Go see Coach Debby or Jackie Bailey. Bye-bye for now.
Bye.
Thank you for tuning in to Life Mastery.